chains! Break the chains! Break the chains! Break the chains! Break the chains!
Thank you so much, Kimberly. Our next speaker needs very little introduction to this group, but I'll give it a shot. Scott Lingenfelter served 28 years in the U.S. Army, retiring at the rank of colonel. He has earned a veritable plethora of medals during his service to our country, but most notably, the Bronze Star and the Legion of Merit Award. Scott has served 5 terms as delegate to the 31st District, which encompasses Prince William and Fauquier counties. He is currently running for lieutenant governor. But most importantly, Scott is a true patriot and a man I call a friend. So please welcome the sponsor of the Banana Bill, Scott Lingenfelter.
Thank you. Anybody had any fresh produce today? Somebody grew it. You know, I was very surprised to learn that when you go in Kroger, they don't actually grow the tomatoes in Kroger. They have to go to farms. They have to go to people who risk their capital, who risk their good name in some cases, to do what? Try to be part of the American dream. You know, we can do a lot of rally speeches and I can give you a lot of red meat and get you fired up, but you're already fired up. And you're here, and I want to be kind of serious with you for a minute. Why are we here? Some will say we're here to support Martha. Surely we are. Some will say that we're here to support the legislation that we'll take in front of the subcommittee and do battle with this afternoon, and surely we are. But the real question that is before us today is, what does this assemblage represent? It represents the sustainment of freedom. Let me give you a little bit of treatment here. How many of you know Os Guinness? You know who Os Guinness is? Os Guinness is a tremendous Christian apologist. And he has spoken as clearly as any person in the nation on the significance of freedom. And he has spoken a great thesis, and it's this: this modern age is working out a freedom that is unsustainable. And it is unsustainable because it is not nested in the cradle of customs that only our Constitution can survive in if it follows the founding vision.
Amen.
Amen. What is being worked out in the country today is a form of freedom that is destined to fail. Now, y'all know that at the gut level. But this is not just about a bill supportive of a great patriot who is trying to live out her American dream. It is about reconnecting with the fundamental notion of what props up freedom. And that the betting, those customs that are so important for the sustainment of freedom are being torn asunder. And let me tell you something. One of the customs is the great tradition of free agriculture in this nation.
Amen.
Hear, hear. Hear, hear. You know, the founders knew they had to win freedom, and they did. But so too did the Russians, and so too did the French, and so too did the Chinese. And all of those revolutions failed and went back. And I'm looking at you young people, remember this. They went back to a form of despotic, horrible condition that was worse than what they overthrew. And the American Revolution did not do that. We won our revolution, but our founders did something that was dramatically different from any revolution in the history of mankind. They ordered that revolution, and they ordered it through our Constitution.
Yeah. Amen.
And so they won freedom, they ordered freedom, but then they also knew they had to sustain freedom. And There were lots of ways that this was expressed. But in general, what the founders believed was that, as George Mason said, and as Patrick Henry said a little differently, was you had to have a frequent recurrence to founding principles. You know, in the church, and I suspect there's some Christians out here, I'm a Christian.
Amen.
That the church always goes forward best by going back first to its fundamental roots and truth. And folks, what I would suggest to you as sustainers of freedom, that is what I am naming you. Is we will always go forward best by going back first. And one of the things that I intend to do as your Lieutenant Governor is I am going to agitate for this freedom proposition like you have never seen in the modern era. Let me conclude by saying one thing that I think needs to be said with respect to where we are in this process. Mark, raise your hand. Mark, who has been such a hero and a personal inspiration to me. And everybody knows Martha. I mean, she's that patriot. She's Lexington and Concord all wrapped up in one, wouldn't you say? You know, when Churchill was approached after the Battle of Britain, remember what he said? They said, "Is this the beginning of the end?" And he said, "No, but it is the end of the beginning." I don't know what the fate will be of this bill today. We have many tough forces arrayed against us. We might not get it. But folks, this is the end of the beginning. I want to conclude by a story about Captain Levi Preston. In 1843, a young Massachusetts scholar, I believe there are a few left, was interviewing, he was 21, and he was interviewing a surviving member of the Revolution, 70 years his senior, Captain Levi Preston. And so as he was preparing to interview Captain Preston, he said to him, "So you went out to fight oppression?" And the old boy raised himself to his full height and stood there and said, "We weren't oppressed." And so the young scholar said, "Well then, certainly you were upset about the Stamp Act." Captain Preston said, "I never paid a penny for one." He said, "Well, what about the tea tax? You must have been upset about the tea tax." He said, "Well, I never drank a drop of it. The boys threw it in the harbor before we got there." And he said, "Well, what about Harrington and Sidney and Lack, the great writers of freedom? Surely you read them." He said, "The only books we had were the Bible, Isaac Watts' hymnal, and an almanac." Yes. So by now this youngster's kind of frustrated. And he says, "Well, why then did you go out and fight?" And the old boy gave this immortal answer. "We were always free. And we intended to say, stay free always." And the redcoats were in our way. Folks, the redcoats today are the people who tell you that the Constitution is a suggestion. I'm here. I'm sure my friend Rob Bell will agree with me. The Constitution is not a suggestion. It is the law, and by God, that's what we're going to fight for.